Unit 11, Commercial Property Management. Learning objectives. When you have completed this unit, you will be able to accomplish the following. Summarize the information required for market analysis and management. Describe how to qualify the prospective commercial tenant, market commercial space, and discuss marketing strategies. Summarize the lease negotiating process and the setting of rental rates. Explain how maintenance varies depending on the size of the property and the obligations of the tenant. Identify types of lease payments and describe the process of setting the rental schedule. Differentiate between the types of commercial properties. Overview. Most professional property management involves structures built on real property that are not intrinsic to the operation of a business or industry. For the purposes of studying specialized property management, real estate can be divided into four major classifications: residential, commercial, industrial, special purpose. Each type of property requires a different combination of knowledge and skills on the part of the manager. This unit will focus on commercial property management, including office property, retail property, and industrial property. Marketing analysis and management. Learning objective. Summarize the information required for market analysis and management. Office property market analyses. Regional and neighborhood analyses are especially relevant to commercial properties. Current economic trends are at least as significant as present market conditions when assessing the supply and demand for office space in an area. Regional analysis. The regional analysis for an office building considers the growing sectors of the regional economy, which may draw national firms to relocate there or to open branch offices. Rates for office space reflect availability or scarcity as determined by the cyclic nature of office building construction. The manager must not overlook the number of new businesses in the area, the quantity of space a typical new business demands, and the number and type of tenants who want to move from their present location into newer facilities. Neighborhood analysis. For office properties, the neighborhood analysis emphasizes transportation, parking, and proximity to businesses and services. The prestige of the address should be highlighted, as should improvements, renovations, and new construction in the area. Absorption rate. In analyzing demand for office space, the property manager must determine the absorption rate, or the number of square feet that have historically been leased in the market area. For example, if there are 3 million square feet of vacant office space in a city, and the absorption in recent years has been 750,000 square feet per year, the city is said to have a 4-year supply of leasable office space. Energy efficiency. Energy costs cannot be ignored. In a triple net lease under which the tenant pays all heat, air conditioning, electric, and gas bills, energy inefficiencies definitely impact the ultimate costs and overhead for the tenant. Even a well-located 20 to 30-year-old building with modern appearances will be negatively impacted if its systems are substandard by today's standards. BOMA building class definitions. BOMA building class definitions provide subjective standards to discuss office markets, either within a local metropolitan area or an international office space market, considering properties in many metropolitan areas. The metropolitan base considers rent, building finishes, system standards and efficiency, building amenities, location and accessibility, and market perception. While BOMA does not recommend publishing classification rates for individual properties, many still refer to the BOMA.org website, where the metropolitan-based definitions include the following. Class of prestigious buildings competing for the best tenants with above-average rental rates, high-quality finishes, state-of-the-art systems, excellent accessibility, and distinct market presence. Class B buildings vying for a wide range of tenants with average-priced rents for the area fair to good quality finishes, and systems are adequate, but value is not as good as Class A for the same price. Class C buildings competing for tenants who require functional space priced below average rents for the area. Another definition includes trophy buildings. These are landmark buildings, usually new, with the latest technologies in the best locations and attracting the most exclusive tenants. The market can be broken down into segments and buildings grouped according to rating and age, condition, location, facilities, amenities, and energy efficiency. Because these standards vary from city to city, any discussion with prospective clients should include an explanation of the area's accepted definition of these classifications. An average market vacancy rate of 12% is misleading unless the manager realizes that vacancies in newer buildings are as low as 2%, whereas older buildings have vacancy rates from 16% to 20%. Once the demand pattern for an area has been analyzed, the rent schedule for a specific building can be determined. Retrofitting a building may bump a property into a higher rated segment, for instance, from a C building to a B building. The property manager can then market the property by emphasizing its advantages over competing properties. To avoid misinterpretation, the manager can prepare a simple one-page handout that outlines the area's accepted definition of the A, B, and C classifications qualifying the rent per square foot to give to each new prospective tenant and incorporate it in any marketing package. This overview is especially helpful if the management company is not directly owned and operated by the builder-developer owner, and even more helpful to those who are not used to the process of renting office space. Misunderstood definitions ultimately lead to poor success at marketing, resulting in a bad reputation for the management company. Office property analysis. Property analysis gives the manager a basis for setting a rental schedule, estimating income and expense for the property, and anticipating the reactions of prospects. The first step in property analysis is to determine the exact size of areas to be rented. Basically, the manager must take outside and inside measurements and factor in the BOMA office classifications previously mentioned to arrive at the appropriate rent for that space. The BOMA standard method for measuring floor area. BOMA has developed a standard method of floor measurement that measures construction, rentable, usable, and store areas in an office building. The BOMA standard was updated in 2010 and has been accepted and approved by the American National Standards Institute, ANSI. A new class of space has been added, including occupant storage as well as other options, regional leasing practices, and measurement clarity. The rentable area. The rentable area is computed by measuring to the inside finished surface of the dominant portion of the permanent outer building walls. The restrooms, janitor closets, and rooms such as electrical rooms, which are necessary to the operation of the building, are usually included and reference the actual area upon which the lease payments are based. Dominant portion. The dominant portion is the inside finished surface of the permanent outer building wall, which must be 50% or more of the vertical floor to ceiling dimension. If there is no dominant portion, or if the dominant portion is not vertical, the measurement for area is the inside finished surface of the permanent outer building wall, where it intersects the finished floor. Any major vertical penetrations of the floor, such as utility shafts, stairwells, and elevators, are excluded. No deductions are made for building columns or projections necessary to the building. Usable area. The usable area is the number of square feet that can actually be occupied. It is computed by measuring from the finished surface of the office side of corridor and other permanent walls to the center of partitions that separate the office from adjoining usable areas, and to the inside finished surface of the dominant portion of the permanent outer building walls. Those portions of the building normally associated with the core of the building, such as corridors, lobbies, restrooms, major penetrations of the floor, and rooms containing equipment for the building, are excluded. Setting the rental schedule. Although the market ultimately will set the rent actually paid, a uniform and realistic rent schedule capitalizes on all the features tenants customarily consider part of rental value. Minimum rents. The minimum rate is the absolute minimum that can be charged for economic survival. It does not take into account contingencies such as vacancy loss, and it does not bear any relation to the current market. Nonetheless, this computation can ensure that the base rental rate suggested by the market and property analyses is high enough to cover the basic costs. The following formula may be used to calculate the minimum rental rate. Operating expenses plus mortgage payments plus owner's return on equity rentable area of building equals minimum rent. For example, an office building with a market value of $4 million contains 64,000 square feet of rentable space. The owner put 20% down on the property and has mortgage payments totaling $90,000 a year. Operating expenses are about $300,000 per year, and the owner needs to get at least a 10% return on the investment or equity. Follow the above formula for computing the minimum rental rate. $300,000 plus $90,000 plus 10% of $800,000 down payment divided by 64,000 square feet. $7.34 per square foot minimum rent. Establishing a base rate. The next step is to establish a realistic base rate per square foot for a typical space within the building. The base rate should be significantly higher than the minimum rate arrived at earlier and should reflect the features of the property and its current value relative to similar buildings in the area. Once the base rate has been established for typical office space in the building, a specific rental schedule for each type of space can be developed. Depending on its features, each office space is graded as above standard, standard, or below the base rate. Ultimately, the rental schedule will reflect variables such as height above street level, floor location relative to elevators, interior layout and decor, natural lighting, and view. New York method. Another method of measuring and charging for office space is the New York method, under which all the construction area of a floor or building in a shopping center is used in determining the rent. For instance, if a building or floor measures 100 feet by 100 feet, the area that must be allocated to tenants in renting the space is 10,000 square feet. Rents will tend to be less per square foot than under the BOMA method, but the number of leased square feet will be higher, because areas that are excluded under other measurement methods are included here. This method is not popular in some areas due to the difficulty of convincing prospective tenants that they should pay for stairwells and elevator shafts, space they cannot actually occupy. Market and property analyses industrial. Although general industrial trends provide a useful frame of reference, the industrial property manager's objective is to match a particular property with a specific firm. This process requires a detailed study of the physical aspects of the property, local supply and demand, and each prospect's needs. The demand for industrial properties is not an independent factor but relies on consumer demand for the product of the industrial process. To determine the market demand for a particular type of industrial property, the manager must know something about the nature of industrial processes and the character of local industrial growth and development. The first step in advertising, showing, leasing, and managing an industrial property is to study its features and the prospectus' reactions to them. The manager should keep a written record of such information, perhaps on a form similar to the one shown. Site selection criteria. To interpret the demand for industrial space accurately, the manager must know why industries select one location over another. When selecting plant sites, an industrial firm will try to minimize production costs, rent, wages, utilities, and taxes and transportation costs for both raw materials and finished goods. The firm will also assess the site's profitability, perhaps by comparing demand and income factors in the local market. In a highly competitive market, the location with the lowest transportation and production costs may not be the most profitable. Profit may be determined by the location of competitors, the importance of customer proximity, the extent of the market area, and the responsiveness of product demand to price changes. Speculative building. Because the planning, financing, and construction of industrial property requires a long lead time, developers in many areas where demand is heavy have been successful in building speculative shell buildings in the most popular sizes. After signing a lease with a tenant, investors can finish a building in a short time, usually no more than 90 days. If the market for the heavy industrial space softens, these speculative industrial building shells are easily converted to lighter industrial use or commercial space. The nature of these building shells allows the developer to be able to install more extensive tenant improvements should this be a requirement of a more commercial tenant who will take the industrial space. Required local market information. An industrial firm looking for space will usually want factual data about the economic base of the community and the population, including family size and composition, average age, income level, predominant occupations, and education. Potential industrial tenants will request data on local transportation services and on the skills, training, and turnover rate of the local labor force. The market survey should look into the availability, price, and source of utilities and fuel, as well as into the financial stability, services, and attitude of local government. Income tax rates, federal and local and assessment policies, municipal services, and zoning ordinances are vital pieces of information to prospective industrial tenants. The information is available to the property manager through public sources such as the U.S. Census Bureau, local tax rolls, and the local unemployment office. Other data can be gathered from the files of banks, local development groups, municipal agencies, utility companies, and university departments of social research and urban studies. The market analysis should include information about any special available financing, such as the availability of tax-free industrial revenue bonds or tax abatement programs, and whether or not the Chamber of Commerce or a similar group has organized an industrial park. These organizations typically subsidize the sale of land for industrial plants at prices well below market rates to attract new industries to the city. In such cases, private investors may not be able to compete. Transportation considerations. Changes in the nation's transportation patterns have encouraged new factories and branch facilities to locate in suburban areas. The freight trucking industry has emerged as the primary mover of goods due to construction of interstate highways and expressway systems. Industrial firms are no longer forced to locate near rail facilities and have left congested metropolitan areas. The labor force, once dependent on urban transportation systems, can now drive to work in outlying areas. These factors, combined with the lower cost of suburban land, have been a catalyst for the construction of industrial developments in outlying areas, plant size and features. Industrial firms relocating in outlying areas tend to prefer one-story buildings with very high inside clearance. The reasons are simple: there is more total usable space in a one-story building, and the cost of construction is generally lower. Also, the single-level plant provides flexibility of spatial layout and ease in moving goods to and from the plant. Thanks to pallet storage and forklift moving equipment, goods can be moved more quickly on one level than they could in multi-level building elevators. Shipping and receiving facilities. Technological changes in materials handling, from delivery of raw materials to shipment of finished products, have mandated the redesign of shipping and receiving facilities of industrial properties. Standard-sized shipping containers have increased the capacity and flexibility of materials handling operations. Plants using this new method require specialized docking and loading facilities, another need that the industrial property manager must try to accommodate. Site selection criteria. Industrial property managers should be aware of alternatives for industrial properties, especially that of multiple tenancies. Although most firms would prefer to reserve an entire building for their use, the economic advantages of multiple tenancies can be attractive to small and young enterprises. When establishing multiple tenancies, managers should give some thought to the rental schedule and tenant compatibility. Multiple tenancy uses are a good mix when very large, much older inner-city type factories and mills are being redeveloped. Often these older buildings have a variety of shapes and sizes that can best suit a variety of tenancies. Areas of concern include energy costs, parking, and loading dock facilities. The functionality and designs of these features were much different when they were built. Land use patterns. Industrial parks. An industrial park is simply a suburban industrial subdivision designed to offer land in outlying areas with good accessibility to comparatively small businesses. They attract businesses that formerly occupied lofts because they allow the tenant to combine office, manufacturing, and storage space in a one-story building. Some were located in cities, and although still used, the term industrial park has become outmoded. Business parks. As occupancy and use in industrial parks changed, first to office, warehouse, and sometimes to complete office use, industrial parks came to be called office parks. Later, the term business park was coined and is now in almost universal use. Occasionally, however, some developers retain the older term. In many cases, the land is sold to an industrial concern, which then builds its own plant. Many cities have areas where there is a concentration of office warehouse buildings, consisting of one-story units with easy access to the internet highway system. Quite often, developers will build several of these buildings on a speculative basis and sell them to individual owners. The multiple owners often hire professional management to maintain the quality, look, and feel of the business park. Corridor development. Another phenomenon is corridor development, which results from the establishment or growth of two large industrial or business centers at some distance from each other on an interstate highway or other major traffic artery. As these two centers expand geographically, allied businesses and plants that service or feed off the large plants locate along the major arteries that connect them. Regional cooperation. Regional cooperation is growing among individuals and organizations responsible for economic development. No longer do neighboring towns and cities compete strongly for industry. Instead, they feel that an industry established anywhere within a reasonable distance of their location will benefit industry in all cities in the area. Industrial development incentives. Industrial areas have been made possible in large part through liberalized zoning ordinances in growing communities. Many are the result of community efforts to raise funds to purchase suitable land to make available to new industry. In the last few years, many surplus military facilities were and are being converted to industrial use through such efforts. Industrial revenue bonds. Industrial revenue bonds enjoy a special tax status, making them attractive to investors. Social and economic changes can affect the desirability of such bonds. Special tax incentives. Many states and cities view industry as a source of employment, income, and tax revenue. To encourage companies to locate to their city or state, they are willing to pass legislation that provides favorable tax incentives to industry. Foreign Trade Zones (FTZ). In addition to revenue bond legislation, federal law also encourages another incentive, the Foreign Trade Zone (FTZ). An FTZ allows a company to import finished goods or component parts and to warehouse them duty-free until shipped. FTZs were created for the purpose of moving foreign or domestic goods in and out of a state without going through U.S. customs. U.S. quota restrictions, duty, and bonding do not apply in FTZs. Imports can be stored, graded, repacked, assembled, processed, or fabricated, sometimes qualifying for lower freight charges without payment of customs duty until the goods leave for the U.S. market. No duty is paid on goods to be exported. Goods may be stored indefinitely in the zones to await the best market conditions, satisfy quota limitations, or take advantage of discount or seasonal prices. Manufacturing in these zones can be extremely advantageous, especially for companies that produce goods from domestic and foreign materials and then export the finished goods. Research and development centers. Designed to bridge the gap between an industry engaged in high technology and the educational resources of its state or locality, research and development centers provide assistance through facilities, engineers, and scientists at research universities. They also assist with product marketing and may offer low-cost, on-campus or off-campus incubator spaces to house new product development groups or startup operations. They are often supported by other businesses, grants, and tax revenues because they provide more than just space. They attract people who often spawn additional business opportunities. Private Industry Councils (PICs). Private Industry Councils (PICs) employ federal funds to operate employment and training programs. Hundreds of employers across the country have benefited financially from PICs on-the-job training programs and by hiring PIC graduates. Endorsed and assisted by the National Alliance of Business, PIC programs train the workforce to meet employment needs. Miscellaneous other incentives. Fixed asset financing, land write-down, urban development action grants UDAG, and tax abatement financing are just some of the many other incentives for an industry to locate in a community. Under a fixed asset financing assistance program, competitive financing is made available through Small Business Administration and other guaranteed loan programs, revenue bonds, and other financing mechanisms. In a land write-down, the local government will, in appropriate circumstances, assemble and subsidize the purchase of land to be sold at a lower than acquisition price, hence the term write-down. Sometimes the community may arrange appropriate long-term land leases to fit the needs of the appropriate prospect. Qualifying a tenant. Learning objective. Describe how to qualify the prospective commercial tenant, market commercial space, and discuss different marketing strategies. Qualifying the prospective office property tenant. Spatial qualifying. Spatial requirements is one of the first areas of qualification because if the space is not adequate for the prospective tenant, there is no further need to proceed. Therefore, it is wise for the manager or leasing agent to analyze prospect space requirements before showing them any specific office areas. The manager should keep a permanent record of all the information obtained when qualifying a prospect. The manager should find out the nature of the prospect's business, the types of staff positions it demands, the number of people in each position, and the tasks that each performs as these variables shape the space allocation plan. Office space varies according to need. The secretarial staff and managerial staff likely will be allocated different types and arrangements of space. From this information, the following 4 different categories of space usage will have been identified. Single office space. This refers to enclosed or semi-enclosed areas serving a single occupant and including a circulation area to provide access to the office. Unit office spaces can vary in size from a private office of about 100 square feet, suitable for middle managers, to a 345 square foot private office large enough to accommodate a company president. Multi-personnel areas. Multi-personnel areas are open or closed workspaces for more than one person ranging from 55 to 90 square feet per person, depending on the status of the individual, company policy, and the number of workers sharing one closed space. In general, when a number of workers share a space, the square footage allotted to each may be reduced. These standards provide sufficient space so that workstations do not interfere with one another and traffic can circulate to and through the work area. Open area requirements can range from approximately 45 square feet each for 15 or more workers to 80 square feet per person for 6 employees or fewer. Special facilities. These workspaces are designed to accommodate the special equipment used by these workers in the course of their jobs. Standard space allotments are difficult to determine for special use areas. Some guidelines have been established. For example, a conference room for 4 people requires about 200 square feet of space, as does a reception area for 3 visitors and a receptionist. A lunchroom for 4 should contain 250 square feet. Miscellaneous areas. Miscellaneous areas do not include permanently assigned work areas such as filing space, traffic flow allowances, libraries, supply rooms, mail rooms, vaults, and computer rooms. Corridors and other interior circulation requirements are often estimated at 15% of the total office area, whereas 5% is usually added for filing space. Access circulation needs can be determined later on a situational basis with allowance for interior traffic flow. Level of quality desired. The manager should also discover what quality of office space is desired, as the business image of the tenant firm will be influenced by the physical appearance of the space. The floor population and the clerical executive mix also must be considered when exploring the quality of space that a prospect desires, because they are sensitive to the visiting clientele for the other tenants on the floor. Most prestige-oriented business tenants want tenants of comparable status in close proximity, whether they are competitive firms or not. Ideally, each floor should be leased by tenants involved in different businesses but enjoying the same level of prestige. Key policy. The best way to gauge a prospect's spatial requirements and other needs is to visit the space the firm is presently occupying and study its current operations, together with any changes or expansions the prospect desires. There is no substitute for this first-hand knowledge and the flexibility it can provide. Additional areas of qualification. After determining the prospect's spatial requirements, the manager then proceeds to related information: motives for moving, rental budget, parking and transportation needs, preferences for amenities and alterations, projected moving date, and special lease clauses needed. It is also important to qualify the representative of the prospect firm with regard to that person's status in the company and authority to make decisions. Sometimes an executive seeking space will not give a property manager all the information needed for proper qualification until the executive is interested in a particular property. In such cases, the manager must show space that corresponds to the prospect's stated specifications. When a suitable space is found, the manager must backtrack and qualify the prospect thoroughly to accommodate the firm's actual requirements. Additional areas of qualification. The following questions should be asked of all prospective tenants. When does your present lease expire? How long have you been in your present space? What is your current rent? Are you interested in new space? Do you need more, less, or an equal amount of space? What is your budget for new space? What is your financial strength? Why do you want to move? When do you need the new space? How many employees will you move? What kinds of improvements and amenities are needed? How much parking is required? Is it paid by the company or the employee? Showing the space. The space itself usually is the factor that transforms a prospect into a tenant. If the space is not skillfully presented and its advantages highlighted, preliminary advertising and qualification efforts will be wasted. It is essential that the management office be attractively furnished, for it is the first office the prospect will see. The manager should begin with a description of the features of the building's locale as brought out in the manager's area and neighborhood analyses. The manager should help prospects visualize their firms in the space and should listen carefully to each prospect's reactions to specific features and benefits. Client responses tell the manager what adaptations are needed to make the space suitable for the prospect. This information is indispensable as the merchandising process moves into its final and most critical stage negotiation of the lease agreement. When showing the space, good lighting is essential. When the space is new or vacant, demonstrating the space with a flashlight is not really effective. If it is a large open space or undivided new space, then in addition to having it well lighted, marking lines every 10 feet with small chalk or spray paint helps delineate the area to make it easier for prospective tenants to imagine their use of the space with walls, offices, hallways, meeting rooms, storage, and so on. If the space has been previously occupied but is now vacant, be sure there is no obnoxious smell or musty odor in the space. If so, find a remedy, as this is a real turnoff to most prospective tenants. If there are any visible ceiling water stains or roof leaks, address these issues prior to the inspection. No tenant wants to deal with the possibility of a ceiling or roof water leak problem. If prior or old leaks were fixed, point it out to the prospective tenant. If there are visible current leaks, then it may be best to have the landlord represent that the issue will be repaired prior to occupancy. Qualifying retail prospects. Retail merchants must be qualified in much the same manner as office tenants are screened. The prospect firm must be financially solvent and compatible with other tenants in the center. Tenant mix. The mix of tenant types and locations is a prevailing concern. Stores should be placed so that traffic generated by one benefits the others, and so that competition is not a detriment. In many cases, two or more businesses of the same kind in a center stimulate competition and add to the total volume of business transacted. On the other hand, if customer traffic is merely divided between the two retail outlets, it is possible that neither profits. For example, if a strip center already has one grocery store, a second supermarket located in that center might possibly fail. A dry cleaning establishment or laundromat might do much better. Industry statistics compiled by the International Council of Shopping Centers show the percentage of total shopping center space typically allotted to each type of store: department store, drugstore, women's specialty shop, tobacco shop, shoe store. For example, more than 7% of the total space in most regional shopping centers is used by food stores, about 23% by clothing stores, 6% by shoe stores, and 4% by gift and specialty shops. These figures can guide the retail manager in selecting the tenant population and the best tenant mix. Location. Location of the vacant space within the shopping center also has an impact on tenant selection. In a large regional center, a men's clothing store is more suitably situated between a men's shoe store and a tobacco shop than between an ice cream parlor and a women's dress shop. Customers attracted to the shoe store, the tobacco shop, or the clothing store will overflow into the other two outlets, increasing sales for all three merchants. Prospect's needs. The manager should be certain that the prospect is the best possible merchant for the particular space and that the prospect will do the highest possible volume of business at that location. The prospect will be concerned about the adequacy of the parking facilities, gross amount of available leasable space, and suitability of the customer market for the prospect's type of business. The tenant must be financially solid enough to pay for or obtain financing for tenant alterations, fixtures, inventory, advertising, rent, percentage rent, insurance, maintenance, and other operating expenses. Qualifying industrial tenants. After attracting industrial prospects, the manager must assess their space, transportation, and labor needs. The manager should pursue several avenues when qualifying an industrial prospect. One of the most important inquiries is the exact zoning status required by a prospect. This determines whether the available zoning will fit tenant needs or whether some special use permit or action by the local Board of Zoning Adjustment must be obtained. For example, with industries handling hazardous materials, the availability of hazardous material disposal sites also may be a critical factor. Total land area required. A plant site includes the total land area within the property boundaries, both open acreage and the area covered by buildings, parking lots, landscaping, docks, and so forth. Custom service, market-oriented industrial firms generally require fewer than 10 acres of land. These industries rely heavily on their proximity to a concentration of manufacturers that serve as potential consumers for their special products, such as precision tools and electronic components. On the other hand, heavy industries such as automobile or aircraft manufacturers may need 100 acres or more. Industries requiring large amounts of land tend to be resource or labor-oriented. Land employment densities. Land employment density is expressed as the ratio of the number of principal shift employees to total land area. Employment density assists in determining the prospective tenant's parking needs. However, because it is based only on the number of workers on the key shift, the figure must be adjusted to allow for shift overlap, which swells the number of vehicles on the premises. In general, the manager can figure that vehicle storage will account for 60% of the total space needed for parking, with the other 40% allowed for traffic flow. Industries with a low ratio of employees per acre 10 or fewer usually require plant facilities with a large area. These are called industry labor-intensive industries, most of which process raw materials. A chemical plant is a good example of this type of industry. Labor-intensive industries, on the other hand, show a high concentration of employees per acre. Electronics firms and other operations using highly skilled professional personnel may have as many as 75 workers per acre, but building employment density. Though it is virtually impossible to forecast a prospective tenant's total floor area needs by the nature of its business alone, some generalizations can be made about building employment density. Labor-intensive industries employing highly skilled personnel, drug manufacturers for instance, usually require 25,000 square feet of floor space or less. Labor-extensive industries, however, often need more than 100,000 square feet of area to accommodate their activities. Gross floor area is the total of all floor space within the exterior walls of the building, with no allowance made for structural projections. To be classified as part of the gross floor area, a space must have a ceiling height of at least 7.5 feet. Unenclosed areas, such as loading platforms, should not be included in the gross floor area. Structural density. The ratio of the total ground floor area of a building to the total land area is called structural density. For example, a 100,000 square foot site on which a plant with a ground floor of 25,000 square feet is located has a structural density of 25%. Standard structural density ratios have been decreasing steadily since 1945, when sites in the central city had ratios as high as 80%. The average density for a general purpose industrial building in today's market is between 25% and 33%, and transportation access. Manufacturers in heavy industry usually require direct access to major trucking routes, air cargo transport, railroads, or even deep water ports. Major thoroughfares to residential areas inhabited by the workforce are also crucial. Wholesalers and distributors need access to trucking routes and to major street systems capable of handling traffic flow for incoming goods and outgoing deliveries. Beautiful industrial areas have stayed semi-developed for years because big companies will not risk bringing their trucks over inadequately raised overpasses, narrow winding roads, and small inferior bridges. Often the developer can work on a plan with the city, county, state, or railroad company to make the required specific improvements up front, with the developer weaving in a tenant assessment on a per square foot basis payment as the space is leased. Financial capability. As with commercial tenants, the property manager should study an industrial tenant's past profit records, financial resources, and backing to be sure that the firm will become a viable, productive tenant. Industrial tenants who want a sale-leaseback arrangement must demonstrate a strong fiscal position before a developer will become involved in the transaction as the owner-lessor. The property manager working for another type of owner should be no less careful. Key policy. Once an industrial tenant leases and takes possession of property, it is difficult to remedy any problems that arise if the tenant is not suited to the space or does not have the operating capital to be successful there. Marketing office space. Marketing office space requires a systematic and continuing program to attract prospective occupants. Once the manager analyzes the prospect space needs, the manager can show them units suited to their budgets and space requirements. Several points can be raised to convince prospects to relocate: a substantial price advantage, accessibility, environment, labor market, increased efficiency, prestige, and economy in a new location. Before starting the campaign, the manager should research the area for specific or special needs and ask, does the building lend itself to special need use? If the commercial district is surrounded by a large residential area with very few nearby medical and dental offices, the target market could be these professionals to move and upgrade their existing offices or open new branches. Signs. During construction, with interest high, signs should be strategically placed to draw attention to the availability of space. After initial lease-up, a sign directing inquiries to the manager should be posted on all office buildings. Websites. Websites advertise constantly. They should be enticing, including pictures of the property as well as prices. The prospect should be able to see how to make inquiries via email, phone, or mail. A properly maintained website will be constantly updated and changing. For an example of a multifaceted website, the investor or potential tenant can find a wealth of information, not just about local conditions but also information for properties worldwide. Brochures. It is a good idea to give prospects a brochure after they have seen the space. They can take the brochure back to share with the other people who will be involved in making the move decision. Classified ads are rarely used to market office space, but well-placed institutional display ads can be effective. Such ads appeal to the decision makers and their influence groups within prospective tenant organizations, emphasizing the prestige and value of the space. Display advertisements in well-selected out-of-town target area newspapers or trade publications, including the Wall Street Journal, reach a select audience over a wide metropolitan or regional area. Direct mail. The quickest way to lease a large new building is to generate movement within the current market. Firms not actively looking for new offices are not generally influenced by signs, ads, or leasing agents, but they may be responsive to direct mail pieces that offer a better value or location than their present office space. A list of potential tenants can be culled from sources like the Dun Bradstreet Reference Book, which lists companies according to the nature of their business. The Dunhill International List provides names of law, accounting, and brokerage firms, as well as small businesses. Letters, with printed materials about the building and a reply card, should be mailed to potential tenants. Public relations. A well-executed public relations program can be a cost-effective supplement to advertising, direct mail campaigns, and other marketing techniques, particularly when dealing with newly constructed multi-story office buildings. News releases are invaluable publicity for an office building. Referrals. Goodwill is a powerful leasing tool, so current tenants are a good source of prospects. Local government officials and utility company representatives often are in a position to provide leads. An ambitious office building manager will cultivate these sources and become active in the local chamber of commerce, professional associations, and other service groups. As in all types of rental property, the manager should check state law to determine whether a fee or lease concessions can be paid to a tenant or anyone else who makes a referral that results in a lease. Canvassing. Canvassing is probably the best prospecting method for leasing office space and is most productive when the list of prospects has been pre-qualified. The Dun Bradstreet Directory and others published by the local Chamber of Commerce furnish the manager with names of firms that might be interested in the particular space being marketed. The financial section of the newspaper often contains articles on firms that are enjoying rapid financial growth, acquiring subsidiaries, or planning for expansion. Though time-consuming, phone calls to area firms can generate business from the inactive market as well as from companies with admitted space needs. Canvassing efforts should begin in areas closest to the subject property and progress outward in concentric circles around the property. Managers of large office buildings often allow leasing agents or sales representatives to perform this function on their behalf. Rental centers. Like large residential developments, new multi-story office buildings often use rental centers. The center should be attractively furnished and space should be provided for private discussions with prospective tenants. Despite what most say, many people cannot imagine how the space can be arranged, so the visual benefits of a model office can go a long way. When there are only a small number of tenants in a large project, a property manager might ask one of the tenants in place if that tenant's office can be used as a model office to demonstrate to potential tenants. Arrange to do this by appointment and offer this tenant a small break in the rent for his cooperation until the building is fully rented. For specialty or new mostly vacant buildings, consider holding an open house, similar to a residential open house, except this is for the professional and business community on a midweek day. To attract attention and to encourage interest, use large signs as well as media ads, newspaper, radio, and so on. Every commercial broker in the area should be invited because these brokers can account for a substantial amount of commercial leasing. Several management team members should be on hand all day to pass out brochures, in addition to light snacks and refreshments. Marketing retail property. Leasing is one of the retail property manager's most critical activities because each retail outlet in a shopping center depends on the traffic generated by other outlets. Percentage leases often are used, giving the owner a vested interest in the retailer's success, so quality tenants and the proper mix of types of stores are a must in retail space. A sign on the property is probably the most cost-effective advertising. Retail space also is advertised by newspaper ads, radio spots, brochures, websites, direct mail campaigns, and personal contact with prospective tenants. Broker referral campaigns and in-house or outside leasing agents are other sources of qualified tenants. When deciding whether to hire a salaried on-site person for promotion or an outside advertising agency, the manager should remember the basic principle that advertising costs should not exceed 20% of the total operating budget for the center. Anchor tenants. Most centers have one or more anchor tenants or key tenants, large stores that through their own advertising will bring in shoppers. With the proper mix, both the large store and the smaller stores benefit. Shoppers know that once parked, they can locate several items at one time or fulfill multiple tasks. For example, on the way home from work, shoppers can buy groceries, pick up dry cleaning, visit a toy store, and buy clothes, parking just once. Major marketing for other tenants is done after the anchor tenants have committed.